It was love is knowing Jesus. Love is knowing Jesus. And so I just want to keep in with the, February love. And so God is love. It's awesome. So if you're taking notes this week, Love is Unconditional is the title that I've given the sermon this week. Love is unconditional, right? So before I jump into my verses that I have for today, I do want to share an interesting kind of a research or study that I heard and read and saw. So there's this study that they did with these women. They picked 100 women, and 50 of them, or all of them, were going to be going through a job interview process. They were going to be interviewed for a job. 50 of them, completely normal, just go in, interview for some job, and then give us feedback afterwards. The other 50, what they did is they brought some makeup artists out, and they painted like realistic-looking scars, pretty significant size scars on their face, okay? And then they were going to send them into the interview. But right before they sent them in, they would have the makeup artist come back and say, hold on, let me just give you one final touch-up. And then what they would do is they would remove the scar and just put them back to plain complexion, right, where you didn't even see the scar at all. But they still thought it was on their face, right? And so then after going in, all these 50 women came back with disappointed or negative comments about the interviewer, specifically saying they felt like the interviewer was referencing their face and their scar. How interesting is that? The scar was not there at all. But they felt, because they thought the scar was there, that they were being discriminated against. And so, whoa, this is a pretty interesting thing, a pretty interesting study, right? But what I think it does is it goes and tells us to how the human mind and the human brain works, and that what we think, and sometimes we put things on ourselves that aren't really there. Something may have really happened, but it's not as bad as you think. Or something happened and God's already healed you from it, but you're still holding on to it. And so how you view the world around you is based upon how you perceive yourself, even when it's not true about you. Crazy, right? So then how's this go along with the topic of unconditional love, right? Well, I think many of us, especially because we're human, we have this perception of love and perception of how things should always just be so wonderful and joyful and different things like that, right? And so we say that when we get married, right, or when we're with our best friend, that it doesn't matter what they do, our love is unconditional, it's this, and that. But if I'm going to be honest with myself, I think that's a lie. I think that we lie a lot and say, oh, I'll love you no matter what, and you're not telling the truth. Because usually we see, it's funny because 50% of marriages end in divorce, so 50% of people statistically already are lying. Because they're like, no, you did something, I was too hurt by it, and I'm done, right? And then even if you stay together in a marriage, that doesn't mean you still love each other. Another statistic that I found out is out of the 50% that stay together, another 25% of those are only staying together for the kids. They're not even staying together because they love each other anymore. They're just like, we just don't want the kids to grow up in a bad environment. We know it does better to have a mom and dad there, so we'll wait till the kids are grown up, and then we'll split. And we tell ourselves that, oh no, when we go into a relationship, my love is so unconditional. My love is all there for you. But is it? But is it really? And I think if we're honest with ourselves, I think we would say, you know what? Jesus, forgive me. I'm a liar. Jesus, forgive me. What should be happening is, right, is like, I'm not giving them your love that's unconditional, right? I'm not thinking about what you want. And so we get stuck in this place of hurt, and where conditions are too hurtful, and then we have to leave that situation, right? It hurts too much. I don't want to be here anymore. It hurts too much. I can't stand what's going on anymore. This person, you don't understand, they cheated on me. You don't understand. We were best friends, and that was the one thing we said we wouldn't do, and they did it to me. Now, I'm not saying these things aren't real. I'm not saying these things don't hurt. I'm not saying that your emotions and that your mind and that what happens in life shouldn't affect you at all and that you should just be a perfect angel everywhere you go 100%. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have good intentions, but why is it so often we fall short? Right? Well, let's go into the Bible and let's read some passages of some people that went through some extreme situations, right? So let's start with Noah. Let's go to 2 Peter 2:5. 2 Peter 2:5. If he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others. Okay? So this here says God spared the world during the flood, and this is in Peter in the New Testament, okay? When people were living ungodly lives, and he spared Noah, who was a preacher of righteousness, and he spared 7 other people. Okay? So from here, we see Peter's talking about he's preaching to his fellow Christians and those that he's trying to help spread the love and the word of God, and he's talking about Noah. Why am I bringing up Noah? By today's standards in the church, Noah, I believe we would call him a failure. I believe we would call him someone who did not live up to what he should have been doing. He was preaching to the whole world while building this boat, and even when finished, he's trying to tell people there's a flood coming, come get on the boat, and out of the whole world, he's a successful preacher of 8, and he's the 8th one. So he preached successfully to 7 people. But most of us would say a church of 8 people is not successful. Right? Right? Let's be honest. If I was somewhere else preaching and I could only save 8 people, one of them was me, would you call me a great preacher of my time? No. Right? He obeyed God. He built this ridiculous ark. And so I don't think we sometimes think about Noah's situation and the extreme pressure he was under, being told by God to build something that nobody's ever built before, for something that's never happened before, to preach to people who aren't going to come. You're going to save animals. You're the vet. What? You're going to save, just your family members and you'll be fine. But just keep preaching. I don't know. I feel like I would have been very, at least angry, if not sad, maybe depressed, about day in and day out for years. I'm building whatever this thing is that God's telling me to build. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I don't know how it's supposed to end. And then I'm trying to tell these people, like, God's going to wipe us all out. Come on. And everybody just laughs. They laugh in your face and they make fun of you. They keep having parties and getting drunk and doing all kinds of ungodly, immoral things as if your words mean nothing. Your words mean nothing. And so we see here in the midst of Noah's story that he, again, by our own standards, is an unsuccessful preacher. He's unsuccessful in trying to save as many people as possible. If this is, I guess I'll put myself in the shoes of Noah. If this is my boat, right? I'm doing better than Noah, right? And I just started not even a year ago, right? And most of these people were already in Pastor's boat, so I just took his boat over, right? So then I look on Noah and I'm like, how could you not win more than 8 people? And I could be critical and I could be judgmental and I could look down on him, but act like all these things because I know perspective and like, don't worry about it, Noah. God will still use you. He'll wipe everybody out, right? The flood will come, and then there'll be stories talked about you. But really, we don't talk really about Noah. We talk about the flood more than we talk about Noah. We talk about the animals and use it as a kid's Bible story so that they learn the animals more than we really learn about Noah. And we don't talk about him being a preacher. We talk about him being the guy with the animals and the guy that built the boat. We don't really talk about Noah. Right? Right? It's just me. Was I the only one that grew up in church thinking this? Was I the only one when they heard these stories? I didn't know that Noah was a preacher. I didn't know that God actually used him to call the people and try to save them, and it wasn't just, when the boat was done. So here I am, as I usually do. I try to insert myself into Noah's situation. God, why? What are you doing? He's preaching righteousness. He's preaching salvation. And no one's listening. And then I tried to feel empathy and sympathy, and I'm like, man, that must have been terrible. Knowing you have a good relationship with God, and knowing you're trying to help and save people, and no one cares. There's nothing you can do. But I want to say this as well, is that some of us, we look at our situation and we think we're failures. Because according to our standards or other people's standards, we're not living up to what we should be doing. In fact, we're doing something completely ridiculous that nobody's ever heard of, hearing voices from someone who's telling us to do things for things that have never happened before. And we call ourselves failures because our businesses haven't taken off. We call ourselves failures because we're not as successful as we want to be. We call ourselves failures because the pinnacle or the height or our goals, they just continue to seem to be out of reach, and we try to help people and no one seems to care. We try to, even if it's not about Jesus, like, hey, can I help you with your car? No, I'm good. I'm fine. Go to the next, oh, can I help you with your groceries? Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm good. And it just seems we keep getting rejected and humiliated, and then we just can't seem to live up. But I'll say this, is that be confident in this, is that if all you do is if you love God, you love your spouse, and you love your children, that's enough to save the world. It really is. That's what Noah did. If you just love God, love your spouse, and love your children, you can save the world. If it wasn't for Noah's obedience, if it wasn't for Noah's devotion in a hard time when things are being asked of him that don't make sense and everybody's laughing in his face, he says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that wasn't even him that said it. It was in Joshua. But you get the point, is he said, at least I'm going to preach to myself and my family. And I'll save my family. I'll put them on this boat. We'll do this all together. So when you're out there and you feel like you're an idiot because God's asked you to do something crazy that no one's ever seen before for a specific time that's going to come that has never happened before, that's when you rely and just say, well, at least me and my family will do it. I mean, I'll try to get other people to come on, this vision that God showed me, this dream that God's given me, but at least get your family. And I promise, if we all did that, if every Christian could just reach out to their family, our churches would be more than full. Right? I think about all the lost cousins, aunts, uncles, different people in my life that are related to me, that have my same blood, that I thought came from the same grandma, that I thought that came from the same bloodline, that was preaching about God, and I don't know where they're at now. I don't reach out to them. I don't talk to them. I don't text them. Oh, well, they don't care about God. If I'm going to tell them something, they'll just reject me and they'll just laugh at me. I can't even do that with my own flesh and blood. And here's Noah saying, I at least have my children. Did you know that in Hebrew, right, all the names in the Old Testament have meaning according to their, I guess, Hebrew translation or Hebrew name? I saw this before, which I thought was cool. But every name, if you take them, I believe it's like in chronological order, has a meaning to it. So I wrote it down. I want to read it to you. But here's the list of names. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. Okay? So father had son, father had son, father had son on the way down. Now I'm going to read the names again with their meaning. Okay? Adam means man. Seth means appointed. Enosh means mortal. Kenan means sorrowful. Mahalalel means the blessed God. Jared means shall come down. Enoch means teaching. Methuselah, his death shall bring. Lamech, the despairing. And Noah, rest and comfort. Has anyone seen this before? Because I saw this. It's good stuff. Okay. So now, let me read from Adam to Noah just the meanings. And tell me if you hear something, okay? Man, appointed, mortal. Sorrowful, the blessed God shall come down, teaching, his death shall bring the despairing, rest, and comfort. Oh, that's good. In chronological order, he names what he's going to do for mankind, for his child, for us. And yet, we will read names as if they're insignificant, just like they heard Noah and said it was insignificant. But through Noah, he was actually bringing rest, comfort, and salvation to all of mankind. How cool is that? How awesome. Many times we don't focus on what is really significant. It's our parents, our children, our spouses. We find it so insignificant, but God says, I named that child. I foreknew them, and I know everything about them. We find it insignificant, and we call ourselves failures. And maybe your children don't serve God in here. And maybe you don't know where your cousin or your aunt, your uncle, your parents are at. I encourage you, reach out to them today. But here we find Noah having an extreme, unconditional type of love for God, because when it got extreme, he never gave up. He stayed faithful. He stayed true in circumstances that were extreme. I'm going to bring up another person. Actually, no. Let me go to this one other part. This is really good too. Let's go to 1 Peter 3:18-22. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteousness for the unrighteousness, to bring you God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit. After being made alive, he went and made proclamation to the imprisoned spirits. Who are they? To those who were disobedient long ago, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. In it, only a few people, 8 in all, were saved through water. Keep going to 22, 21. And this water symbolizes baptism that now saves you also, not the removal of dirt from the body, but the pledge of a clear conscience toward God. It saves you by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven, and it is at God's right hand with the angels, authorities, and powers in submission to who? Jesus, to him. I thought this was interesting. Really cool. When Jesus dies, his mortal body, he's dead on the cross, his spirit comes alive. And one of the things that he did was to go to all the imprisoned spirits, the people that died who also no longer had bodies, but their spirits live forever because we're immortal. He goes and preaches to them. I didn't forget about everyone that I wiped out in the flood. I'm going to go preach to them now, spirit to spirit, and say, I can still save you. Many of us think that we just wiped out the flood and that's it. They're done. They're lost. Jesus didn't forget about them thousands of years later. How cool is that? That means no matter what you've done at any point in your life, Jesus doesn't forget it, and he's coming back for you. Just like he's coming back for all of us. I don't know. I guess I just nerd out a little too much about this stuff. And Jesus is just really cool to me. But right when he dies for all of our sins, the first thing he does, or one of the things that he does, is he goes and he preaches to people that never had the chance to hear him. Unconditional love. Didn't matter when you died. Didn't matter how you lived your life. I'm telling you, Jesus is coming for you. I don't care what you've done. I don't care where you've lived. Noah did his best, but Jesus got his back. So while we thought Noah only got 8, right? Jesus says, I'll take care of the rest. How many times, again, do we do this in life? We think, I am unsuccessful, but Jesus says, I'm not finished. I'll take care of the rest. You just do your part and make sure my will continues to go on. Make sure my people who love me, continue to thrive and survive. Based on who? On me. The obedience to what I tell them to do. Build an ark. The flood's coming. Build an ark. So when God talks to you, just obey. Just listen. And if you think you're failing at it, don't worry. Jesus will come back around. He has your back, and he'll finish what you started because it was his original idea in the first place. Again, wow. Not only is Noah showing unconditional love in the face of an extreme situation, but Jesus doesn't forget about it, and he shows even more unconditional love. Let's go to the next person I want to talk about is Abraham, who also was in a crazy situation. Let's go to Genesis 22, starting with verse 1 to verse 5. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut off enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you. Here goes what I call another extreme situation of what God is asking Abraham, the father of the faith, to do. Now, one of the reasons why I find this a crazy situation is because the only reason why that Abraham had hope was because of God in the first place. He never thought he was going to have a son of his own, from his own blood, that he could pass on that was biologically his. Because he had a barren wife. And then God promises him to be the father of many nations, and then gives him a son, and not the way that he messed it up with Ishmael, but with Isaac, the right way, which could lead me to a whole nother story. That's a whole nother sermon for another day. But God gives the promise of Isaac to Abraham, and then asks, okay, now time to sacrifice him. What? I love my children very dearly. If you know me, I thought that I would always have all boys. My father is the youngest of all boys. I am the youngest of all boys. My grandfather, where my dad came from, was the youngest of all boys. So I figured I'd have all boys. I'm like, yeah, it's just God's plan in the genetics, it's just going to happen. And then Ella came out, so that ruined everything, right? But my wife will ask me questions every now and then. One of the ones that she will ask me randomly while she's looking at me, and she's like, "Do you love your children?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I really do." And she's like, "Do you ever wish you still had all boys?" No, I don't. I wouldn't trade my daughter for any boy in this world. And I say this to say I love my daughter very much. I love my son. I love my twins. I'm not sure if I'd sacrifice them. I'm not sure I'm Abraham. I want to be God's friend, but to be God's friend is to sacrifice my Ella? I don't like the sound of that. The very Ella that God gave me, which means literally gift from God, which is why we named her that. No, God, I'm not going to do it. This isn't you. Find another way. Right? No. I'm not hearing from God. God would never say something like that. He's not about murder. He's not about killing. I know what you're about, God. You're about life. You're about this. And I start telling God everything that He's about. Right? Or the one boy I did get, Nathaniel, which is another miracle and healing within itself. We were going to name him Raphael, which is my dad's middle name, which means God, my healer. And for whatever reason, it was weird. The last minute we changed it to Nathaniel. We don't find out till after he's born, but there was a knot in his umbilical cord, and that he easily could have died or had complications in the womb or in birth because he wouldn't have had life support because of the knot that was in the umbilical cord. Nothing happened. He came out completely healthy, completely fine. Babe, what does Nathaniel mean? Also gift from God. I don't think it was by accident that God had us change his name, because he didn't want to call him God my healer from a knot being in his umbilical cord. He just wanted him to be a gift, to say, here you go. I was watching out for him the whole time, even when you didn't know, even when the doctors didn't know, even when the nurses didn't know, even though we did sonograms and did regular checkups, and we were there weekly, or however often we needed to be. I think the twins was weekly because they were, but we were there regularly, and nothing. God was taking care of him the whole time. And so we name him Nathaniel rather than Raphael, and we didn't even know. And I'm so proud of that boy, and I love that boy so much, and I love talking about my children. I'm bringing it back to Abraham, putting myself in his shoes and saying, I can't do this. I have 4 children, and I can't even sacrifice one. Why would you ask this of him? Why would you put him through an extreme situation? And I'm like, wow, God, please don't ever let me be Abraham. He's like, well, then don't please ever ask to be my friend. Oh, man, I got real, right? We don't look at it that way. We always look at it, well, God just wanted to test him and always provide a way out, right? The Bible says test. He tested him, so we know with looking back on history that it was a test. Abraham had no clue. He thought, okay, this is what God wants. I can't fight God. I can't beat God. And he's the one that gave me this in the first place. I guess I got to do it. I think one of the things that Abraham realized was that it was far better to still be God's friend than to have his son. I think one of the things that Abraham realized was that if God can do it once, he can do it again. I hope to have in the moment, because this situation hasn't arisen for me, but I do go through other hard situations, and when they come, I seem to crumble under the weight and pressure. My wife says something that I feel disrespected. What'd you say? It's nothing. Abraham was just asked to kill his son, and I can't take a slightly disrespectful remark from my wife. I can't swallow that. What'd you say? Right? Act like I'm this big brooding guy, like I'm actually going to hit her or something, you know. What'd you say? Huh, woman? Know your place. I'm the head. Right? I don't say that to her. Say it again, woman. But you get the point that I'm trying to make, is that obviously there are times where we disagree on life. I don't like what she said to me because I'm insecure about it or something. And here I am being petty about a dumb, small situation that I can't swallow, and God is asking Abraham to kill his son, to sacrifice him. And not just kill him, sacrifice him to me, the very one that gave him to you. See another crazy example of an extreme situation to where love has to abound more than what we're going through in the moment and in the situation. We're selfish people, we are. Oh, well, I'm just so overwhelmed. Just give me a second, you know? I don't know. Me, sometimes, I just got to get away from it all, right? I step outside, and then I'm like, why? Right? And I come back in, I'm like, I'm cool. I'm okay. And again, it was a tiny situation. Why are things for me so conditional? What did Abraham know that I didn't? Right? I keep repeating and repeating and circling and circling. But I'm making the comparison for us to get in our heads that you and me are petty, childish little children. We call ourselves unconditional, but we're not. We call ourselves so super at loving and say, well, I'll die for my children. Why do a lot of households alienate their children? Or why do a lot of households aren't able to tell their children no? You really love them, but you'll never tell them no? Which means that they go out in the world and think everyone's going to say yes. And then they get hit with all no's. And then they can't cope with life. Right? You love your children? Do you really? Because God says, I correct those I love. I tell no to the ones I care about. Why can't you? He's not saying that you got to beat them. No. I mean, every once in a while I do feel like Eliana might need a beating, but I pray really hard. Right? You guys get it. You have kids. But no matter the case, no matter the situation, whether you're too soft or too hard on your kids, you say it's unconditional, and it's really not. Because at some point, you get fed up because you're human, and you let your human judgment, your human thinking, your human criticism, your human thoughts, your human hurts, your insecurities. That's it. I'm done with you, kid. Go with your mother. I'm done with you, spouse. Get away from my face. I don't want to see you for a while. Can't handle you. Conditions have now been met where they are no longer unconditional. Nothing compared to sacrificing your child. Right? Now, I'm not here to beat down on you and tell you you're a terrible person by any means. It'll get better later, okay? I promise. It gets good. But I also don't think I'm doing my job if I'm telling you you're perfect and that all that's ahead of you is dreams and gold and rainbows and sunshine, and you're going to complete all the goals you ever did, right? and that the promises that God has for you are going to be a breeze, and he's just going to hand them over like the lottery, and you don't even have to play the lottery. He'll just drop the money in your lap. Now, he can do that if he wants to, but I think I would be doing you guys a disservice if I'm telling you that God's never going to ask something extreme and super unconditional of you. The way that he loves you unconditionally. Yeah, you thought I was going to bring it, how unconditional God's love is, right? No, I'm talking about humankind in the Bible that went through extreme conditions where they still chose God. Why am I telling you this? Because then you can go through it too. Jesus himself became a man and went through extreme conditions. He did it, and Abraham did it, and Noah did it, and Joseph did it, and David did it, and Paul did it, and Peter did it, and I can name you extreme condition after condition after condition that the humankind did. But how? Through the Spirit of Jesus Christ. Through the love of Jesus. Through forgiveness of our spouses, of our children, of our neighbors, of our co-workers, to where we're able to love unconditionally no matter what the situation, no matter how extreme it gets, even if it means sacrificing our kids or being completely unsuccessful in anything that we do with situations we've never heard of. One thing I want us to realize about Abraham is that it is not a do and don't scenario for Abraham with God. The only way he's able to do this is if he has a real relationship with God. If it's about the do's and don'ts, Abraham would have reminded God of his promises. If it was about the do's and don'ts, he would have said, this is not like your character, God. There are things that Megan will ask of me, and I use a marriage because God uses a marriage, that I don't like sometimes. But I do it anyway because I have a relationship with her and I love her more than I dislike the task. I believe this is what Abraham had a relationship with Jesus to where he loved him more than he disliked the task. I'm going to go into my next part now. I'm going to paraphrase. I didn't give Matt the verses for this, but because of the sake of time, it's the parable where Jesus talks about a king who forgives his servant of a lot of money that he wasn't going to be able to pay back. In today's time, it would be like $1 billion. The guy could never pay it back in 100 lifetimes. But he says, you know what? I forgive you. Then that same very servant goes out and has someone that owes him money, and it was like chump change. It was like $20. But the guy was too poor to pay it back, but he said, I'll work for it. Just give me more time. He said, no, you're going to go to prison because you can't pay back a debt you said you owe. Then the king finds out about it and says, you threw him in jail for $20. I forgave you for $1 billion. That's not right. If you're going to treat people like that whenever you've been treated like this, you're going to go to jail. Set that other guy free. Oh, by the way, your family and your kids have to come to jail with you too. This is the story. In this story, Jesus is focusing on forgiveness. If you couldn't forget and forgive the debt that was owed to me, that I forgave you of, yeah, is that right? That I forgave you of, and you couldn't forgive the small debt for the person that only owed you 20? You got it all wrong. See, I thought this was going to ignite true love and true forgiveness and true patience and true kindness in you because you were just forgiven $1 billion. So anything that was owed to you doesn't have to be paid to you for you to be paid to me. let me say this. Whatever you think it costs you to forgive someone else, it'll always cost you way less than what Jesus forgave you. To make the silly comparison again, I did it with Abraham and his son, right? We can't forgive someone who's offended us, and I'm going to try to make it as extreme as possible to get a point across. You were raped by someone. This stuff happens in real life. This stuff's real. They took your innocence. They took your security. They took your emotional stability. They invaded your home. You don't feel safe anymore. They beat you. They took your money. That's $20 to God. What? That's $20. God forgave you of a lot more. He died on the cross. Salvation, what He did for you far outweighs the rape. Oh, I don't like to hear that, Tim. Right? But this is what He's saying. This is what He's saying. Your extreme conditions that you think are extreme conditions that you now mark as unconditional because I don't ever want to be in contact with that person again. Do you understand what they did to me? It's $20 for what Jesus did for you. He has loved you more. He has been there in every situation. He knows that you were raped. He was probably there when you were raped. Well, why didn't He do anything? He did. He died on a cross. I don't think we really understand the weight of forgiveness because many times we think, oh, forgiveness is for the person that got offended. And I hear this a lot, and this is true. Don't get me wrong. This is true. But we make this a focal point, and it's probably not. I don't think it is. But we say, oh, well, when you forgive them, you get set free. And now you can live your life. And so forgiveness is for your own personal freedom. So I'm going to forgive you so I can be free. That is extremely selfish. I'm doing something for myself. That's called selfish. Well, then why do we forgive, Tim? See, if we apply that same situation to God, did God forgive you to set Himself free? No, He didn't. He was already free. He's God. He's the king of everything. He's the creator of the universe. What's He need freedom from? He does whatever He wants. So if that's what we're telling people, that's what freedom is for, I think we're missing the point. So then Jesus, why did you forgive me? Because you were lost, you were broken, you were hurt, you were separated from me. Why I forgive you is to restore the relationship. That's why I forgive you. Because I never, ever want there to be any sin or any cause or anything ever between us ever again. So I'm going to make it impossible for anything to stand in my way from you. That's why I forgive you. This is what forgiveness does with our relationships. Megan makes me mad. Sorry, babe, I'm talking about you a lot, and she really doesn't do this a lot, but it happens. She makes me mad, but I forgive her because I don't want anything ever, any sin, any insecurities, any hurts, or any pains to come between me and that woman the same way that Jesus did for me. I want us to live a life of love forever till we die. Till death do us part, not till unlike or conditions are met do we part. So I've committed to myself that what Jesus did for me, I will do for her. No matter what you do to me, I am coming at you 100%, and I will forgive and restore the relationship. And you can see, in life, when people aren't truly forgiven, the relationship still is terrible. Oh yeah, like I forgave them and everything, but I don't ever want to see their stank face ever again. I don't like them. And if I do see them, I'll punch them. Like, what? Then what? Then you probably didn't really forgive them. On your side of it, you have to say, I completely forgive them because what Jesus did for me was far more valuable. But if I say I cannot accept and do what I need to do to restore the relationship wholeheartedly and completely, I say Jesus' death on the cross and his forgiveness for me was not sufficient, so I can't forgive that $20, so then what you will do is you will go and spend years in prison till you've learned the principle of God's love through forgiveness. And conditions will always be in your life. Your love will never be unconditional. Never be unconditional. And I hate to say it, the reason why is because I'm talking about myself, where I just can't forgive, and I'm angry, and I'm bitter. But I'll tell you, God's love is greater. God's forgiveness is way more far valuable. We learned last week that just knowing about him is far more valuable than anything that we can do, imagine, and think of. Worship team, you can come up. We have two amazing men of God that God used to bring about God's purpose in their life. And if we look at it, it's an extreme condition, and many times it didn't make sense. I'm going to go back. Can you pull up verse 5 again, Matt, if you don't mind? Genesis 22:5. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I am with the boy. Go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. I'm going to touch on this part before I hit my ending conclusion, my last point. But sometimes the people who are originally taking the journey with you, you have to leave them behind because they will not understand what God is asking of you. They will not understand unconditional love. They would have thought if they knew that Abraham was going to kill his promised son, they would have stopped him and said, you're gone crazy. You're dumb. You'll never achieve that dream. You'll never be that close to God. God would never ask that of you. Sometimes you have to let them stay where they're at and come back. And let yourself go to the condition that's extreme to let God work and do what he wants to do and then come back. And then you come back with a sacrifice and saying, I didn't kill my son. And this is why, and God did this, and he was just testing me. And then you have a testimony, and you have so much more to offer. I want to end with an illustration. Another extreme one, but I feel like it drives the point home. Imagine that you're at home, and a robber comes in, and in order to take what they want, they kill and murder your whole family. They're all dead. You happen to survive, but then they get away with all your stuff. But then they catch him, and he's been arrested. So we take him to court. He's accused of murder. He's accused of stealing, robbing, breaking and entering, right? Then they get there. Before the judge, he's presented all this information about him. All these terrible things that he's done. The judge says, you can go free. What? It's okay. He can go free. What do you mean? He killed my family. I was there. He took all my stuff. I was there. He broke into my house. He doesn't have a key. I didn't give him a key. Broke my windows and broke my door down. I was there. I saw it. He's guilty. Why aren't you punishing him? the same premise that happens with God, with Jesus. So many times we look at other people and see their faults and see their pain and see their hurts and their insecurities and all the things that they've done wrong, and see all their sins, and see how they have anger, and see how they don't treat their spouses right, and see how they don't treat their kids right, and see how they're sinful. Oh, and they drink, and they smoke, and they have tattoos, and they blaspheme God, and they do this, and that, and da-da-da-da. And we're so fast to point the finger and say, they did what was wrong. I was there in the situation. I saw them cursing up a storm and saying, GD this, da-da that. I saw them with that. I saw the text, and they had pictures, and it was nasty, and it was nudity, and it was whatever, da-da-da. And I saw it. They're guilty, God. Punish them. But if God punishes them, God's seen everything. He's also got to punish you. And this is a great conundrum that we struggle with, is like, but I don't like what they did to me. I don't like that they hurt me. I was there. I still feel the pain. I don't have a family anymore. They're guilty. Please, God, do something about this. But I love them. And I'm slow to anger. I'm abounding in love. I'm abounding in forgiveness. The judge said that? Probably do something sideways to the judge, right? I think many of us think, to wrap up the illustration, that God just like took our sin, put it in a ball, and just threw it in the sea, right? To not be seen anymore. No, he did something far worse. And I think this is where I think Abraham may have gotten a glimpse into this. But he took everything that we did, and he threw it on Jesus. Every sin, every hurt, every pain, every evil thing you and I and anyone in this world, past, present, and future, will ever do, has done. And he put it on Jesus and tortured him with it and beat him and killed him and put it to a cross, and then threw Jesus in the depths of the sea. That's what he did to his own son. Those are extreme conditions. That's extreme hurt. That's extreme pain. Did it for you. He did it for me. Jesus said, I'll do it. God had to be okay, and I just said, getting emotional. I couldn't even touch Ella. I've yet to even spank that girl. She's such a softie. And here, the whole sin, the evil, the corrupt, the nastiness, the pain, and the hurt all went on God's Son, Jesus, and he did that for you and me. Call ourselves unconditional lovers. That's the best part, is that Jesus was so unconditional. He took the most extreme, unconditional situation, put it on himself, so that you no longer have to live the consequences of any extreme decision ever. You get heaven. You get blessing. You get healing. But most of all, you get restoration of your relationship with Jesus. That is the most valuable thing, the most unconditional thing you could ever have. You want to flip it on the other way? What thing would you ever trade for Jesus? Under what conditions would something equal the value that Jesus gives you? Nothing. I recently got back into All right, I'm going to say it. Pokemon cards. Not so much because I like Pokemon, but because apparently there's like huge value in it. And I was at the store the other day and there was a pack on clearance and I got like some pretty good ones or whatever. And I'm like, oh, wow, I paid $1 for this pack and this one card alone is worth like $10. I'm going to flip Pokemon cards. So I started looking up the most valuable cards, and I guess like the most valuable one is this particular one that's worth like over $500,000. Or no, someone paid like millions of dollars for it. A card, a Pokemon card. Like, are you kidding me? That one card, they would never trade it for anything. It's a Pokemon card. Are you kidding me? Someone is willing to pay millions of dollars for a dang card. But they don't realize what Jesus did for them. That's $20 to Jesus. Do you see where I'm going with this? Jesus is so valuable. Jesus is so worth it that anything you could give the whole world up, literally. If you own the whole world and give it to Jesus, it would still not be worth the trade. It's still not worth the trade. The conditions will never be met to the value that is Jesus. It's so funny to compare it. It's like $20 of the world compared to $1 billion that is Jesus. Yet we'll trade all the time and make things conditional. You may stand up. I encourage you today, please think on this. Think on the value of Jesus Christ. Think on the value of his sacrifice on the cross. Think on the value of his forgiveness for you. It's so far more valuable that it becomes unconditional. That's why if you have Jesus, you can go through any situation. If you have Jesus, you will always have life. If you have Jesus, you are always successful. If you have Jesus, you become unconditional. These altars are open. I would love to pray with you. Let the Holy Spirit speak to you. Like I said, the Holy Spirit's moving. God's pouring out his Spirit. And we got to be ready. Got to have our hearts ready. We got to have our minds ready. Because God is pouring out his Spirit and he wants to use you. Let him use you. Here's all of me and say, God, please make me unconditional just like you are for me.